Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I am Clementine, and as always, I am Super Saiyan. But never mind that. I guess it's been almost 5 years ago that I made a drawing, which became a rendering. And I went to chopping up an oak farm table from the 40s. Took a chunk of that, started cutting and grinding on that, banged it into an awesome guitar neck. Then I ripped a 2x4 down into 16th inch veneers. And after a bunch of banging and winding, some dunking and some different dunking, some controversial takes and techniques, as well as some redneck science, we had a neodymium P90 kind of jazzmaster hybrid that could Dwayne Eddy. As well as a set of split coil 3-pole humbucker like a G&L or a P-bass that could skinner. Then I used a drill as a lathe to make a $5 roller bridge not suck. We even super bling polished some frets like a girl. Went to hacking at that table again. Glue up some slabs, go to the bandsaw, cut me out a body. Then after some drilling and some routing, we stuck her together for the first time. And proved that without friction, a cheap Chinese Bigsby will stay in tune. You can dive bomb it. She got blown back apart, the body was sanded to shape, we did arm and belly carves with a grinder, and finally she was sanded slick, and the body was finished with a custom tinted hand rub lacquer style polyurethane finish. And that would be the last time it was featured on this channel. Now, something to note is that I had never done any of this before. The original point of this rendering and this guitar was to make my first scratch guitar build extremely complicated and difficult, and to dispel and disprove many guitar dude myths by doing everything that the guitar building forums told me not to do. I didn't have a shop to work in. I was having to buy the tools as I go. The bandsaw I had to buy broken and fix. Either way, I'd kind of figured that the interest in this guitar had pretty much died out. But I've had several people ask, what happened to it? When you gonna show it again? So, for what's left of the 1,000 of you that were here when I first started this, and for the nearly 10,000 of you that have shown up since then, all those videos are together in a playlist, which I'll put a card in the corner right here. And what do you say we take our time machine back to last summer, where I finally spray some finish on this neck, buff the body, assemble the entire guitar, and hear it make its first electronic sound. How about that for a long intro? Well, anyway, if this sounds like something you might be interested in, stay tuned!
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
The first order of business would be to remove these cheap locking tuners. These are like a knockoff Schaller design. When I bought these 5 years ago, I think they were only $4. Yay, inflation. Next, I just started working the length of the back of the neck down with some 60 or 80. Start to work out that final slickness. I used the same piece to work around the headstock, get all those sharp corners off, and get the edges where it would feel like something that more like a finished product. I was also somewhat finalizing the shape, as this had never been really refined or even sanded to the point to remove the bandsaw marks. One of the places with the worst amount of bandsaw marks was that little headstock transition where I cut into it to thin the headstock down, so I worked on that a little bit extra. It smoothed out fantastically. Next, I just repeated the process with a shear form block, which really helps to get those bandsaw marks off the top edge of the headstock. And this started really getting the back of the neck nice and slick. Then repeated the entire process again with a finer sandpaper. Went ahead and took care of any fret sprout that may be there with the shear form block as well. Then I just quickly worked the oxidation and finger grime off the fretboard with tough Scotch-Brite and then pretty fine sandpaper, being careful to not hit those frets because we definitely don't want to repolish these. That was a job and a half. And luckily they're still shining like that tobacco spit in the corner of Papaw's mouth. And on account of that, I'm going to start taping these frets off. I know that some companies will spray over the frets and then do the fret work, but I'm just going to slap some masking tape over these, take a sharp razor, work it up under the edge of each side of the fret, cut them in, and kind of stuff that loose tape edge up under the fret. You can see in this other camera angle, it's not real hard. You just kind of stick the tape to the top of the fret, fold it around the fret, cut it in with the razor blade, stuff it in, and pull the excess. So what I decided to use to get some color on the headstock and the back of the guitar neck without having to break out all that wipe-on poly, which finishes shiny. This is satin. The back of the neck ought to be nice and smooth. I'd put shiny polyurethane on the back of the neck on my Telecaster build years ago, and I ended up scuffing and sanding most of that back off to get a good satin finish back there. For whatever reason, the focus in this shot is terrible. But that's why we got two cameras running at all times, right? Well, nope, it ain't that kind of channel. Fail, let's go back. This shot will still serve plenty well to show you what I'm trying to point out here, which is a color change on that headstock. That polyurethane's a blonde, honey brown color. And now to get that fretboard to look like liquid glass and to shine up that headstock, I'm grabbing a super old can, like 70s, 80s. If you ain't using vintage paint, what are you even doing?
Hell yeah, you get a bad batch. That mojo ain't no good.
Either way, this is a Krylon triple thick glaze. This is like made for paper mache, pottery, stuff like that. It goes on so thick. Just one or two coats is all you need, and it self-levels. It's so thick it goes on looking like orange pilly or stippled. And yeah, I'm watching The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. But when it dries, it sure does slick on out. Look at that grain. It also seems to burn in and play very well on the edge with the polyurethane. As you can see, all this was left very rustic. Some bandsaw marks and grain texture in the wood's fully visible. The part that I really like is the play between all these different grains and wood types and textures. The differences in tone of all the different stains and finishes is really becoming the best part of this guitar, I think. When you back up and look at it all at once, it's kind of really kick-ass looking. I know I'm biased, I designed it, but I mean look at it. But my favorite part of it is probably the bottom edge, where there's a straight, flat, light-colored edge alongside that original tabletop, which has also been stained. But when I was finishing it, it somehow got a bunch of runs right there. So I take a block and some sandpaper and start cutting those runs down, and then I take some other finer sandpaper, just rub it all flat, and I go to hand buffing it to see how slick I can get it. It's working so well, I just start doing the rest of the guitar. I start getting worn out, lazy, so I bust out the little tiny buffer, start really getting her shined in. I apply some red rouge, hit her again, and I'm getting super spoiled, so I decide to start rubbing the coarse compound all over the back of the body and start working the whole body under there. Maybe you can tell this is leading up to something, and this really is. It's going great until right here. Let's get an instant replay of that, shall we? In slow motion. How about from another angle, Bill?
Well, that wasn't good. Myself.
So there you go, folks. It ain't that I don't ever mess up. Maybe it's more about the fact that I might do it so often that I know exactly how to fix this and make it completely invisible. To temporarily preserve it and keep it from getting all wonky and swollen, I just put some super glue brand wood glue in there, put a little spring clamp on it, while I could wipe off all the extra rubbing compound from the back of the guitar, and then I replaced that clamp with two actual ratcheted wood clamps. And just like that, the video gains an extra chapter: how to repair a chipped guitar body and color match 80-year-old stain in a custom color finish. So the first thing to do after the glue is dry is to take some rough sandpaper, start smoothing out all those edges where it busted and kind of squished out, as well as sanding off all the finish in the surrounding area of the glue, squish out in any higher protruding grain or raised material. And a good thing to use for this also is a razor with two pieces of tape on it to hold it at a perfect height and keep it from digging into the body while it only just takes off the high part. After a bit of progressive sanding, it's already looking pretty good, but the tiny crack around it is visible and it has a little bit of a color difference. So I just flooded the entire crack with super glue and then took some sawdust from the box that was under the bandsaw when I cut out this body. Oh yeah, I kept sawdust for 5 years, but I just drizzle it and pack it into that little crack there, let it dry, wipe off the excess, sand it down, and now it really is nearly invisible. And this is when I started thinking, well, I gotta finish match and respray anyway, so might as well start taking off these runs, what's left of them. They had slick downs flat, but the color difference was still very visible. Of course, then the perfectionist starts kicking in. I start looking around on the guitar everywhere. And this is kind of why mistakes can be a good thing. This guitar does turn out a lot better in the end. I think what I'm doing here is like scraping off a run with the razor blade, sanding all that completely down slick, and then even getting on the top horn of the guitar and getting some problems taken care of there. I used some good flexible electrical tape to mask off the front edge of the guitar so that no paint at all could get on it. And I mean, the reason I'm using electrical tape is because it's so flexible. It's just like pinstripe. So that way all that I have to do is just take some newspaper, fold it, take regular masking tape, and mask it on there. And I mean, you might be looking at this thinking, oh no man, you gotta tape it better than that, it's gonna overspray. Well, I'm kinda counting on that. You see the way I have it sitting on top of this grill up on the handle where the bottom of it can get fogged. And yeah, this is bad cameraman work. I'm holding the phone in one hand trying to paint with the other. But after I fog in that edge real good, I can get around to the bottom and just let that natural fold of that paper cut off the overspray like a fade. Then I actually did fog up under the guitar body to turn in the new finish to the old finish. And I also started untaping it immediately while it was still wet so I would never get a hard edge there. When I take this stuff off of that edge, it'll kind of flow in. The way this triple thick glaze works, it will just lay down and create an invisible edge. After I hung up the guitar to dry, I looked at the difference between the front and back. I just shot the whole back of the guitar instead of making that one little repair up in the corner. Oh, and look, that repair never happened. I just bumped it with a squirt of polyurethane and cleared over all of it. Check it out, here's a picture. Can you see the repair? I bet you think you can see the repair, but that's a grain line. This is where the repair is. So after the neck cured for a day or two, I started ripping all them little tapes off of there. Took my razor, sliced a run off the headstock, polished that in. And now y'all remember I said that all that orange peel would lay right down? Well, check this out. Oh, and I still couldn't stand that small amount of finish on the back. Satin or not, I took the Scotch-Brite and rubbed most all of it off. So after that body cured for a couple days, I buffed it down. By hand, as you can see. I learned my lesson very well. Then I just used a napkin and some water to get all that rubbing compound out of all the grain. Wipe the front down again and she's ready to start assembling. So I start taking a sight line down the neck, using the Allen key to get that truss rod tight, see if I can get the right amount of preload to give a perfect low action. Then I started putting those tuners back in and I noticed that one of them was too long and it wouldn't tighten up. So I put that collar in the vise and hit it with a little hacksaw and then a file. Then after I put in the screws and tighten up the nuts, she's pretty snazzy looking with that shiny headstock. Now I can put it on the back plate and put the screws in on the neck. They call them bolt-on necks, but they're screws. It just sounds better than saying screw-on neck. I made sure to double check it, loosen the screws, flip it around, and then make sure that it was laying flat in the back of the neck pocket. Because sometimes I've seen that a guitar appeared to need a neck shim. It was actually just being held off by the screws not being tightened all the way and running out of travel against the back plate to make it seem like they are. Now we're finally ready to start putting some pickups in here. So I take one of these little pine 3-pole humbuckers, stick that wire through there, fish it through and pull it like spaghetti. With the second one I take a little flathead, fish it up, pick it up, get it, pull it through there too, and then a little bit of adjustment to get them straight as I can. And that's when I realized that there's not a big enough hole for all these 3 pickup leads to go through. So I take this drill bit and I start drilling into the small one that the P90 lead is going to go through, and then I come from the other side and pick it back up and try to get them to connect together. And then I took a flathead screwdriver, reached in there and tried to break that septum out, but it really wasn't going well. This wood is super hard. So I took the Big Mac Daddy drill bit and just started coming in from the bottom and pushing it all the way through that one hole. And after it broke through, you could see clean through there. That'll work. Now we can take a small drill bit, put it through the mounting holes of the pickup, start drilling some pilot holes. Then the same for the treble pickup. Then after that, we can lace these wires through here, get them up out of the way. Throw these brass screws in the bass side pickup to start tightening them down And for the first time ever since all this was made, the pickup is actually mounted inside the guitar. Then as I started on the treble pickup, I looked at the route is a little wonky, but if you remember back when I was cutting it out, that was when I had to flip the template over and use it twice, so this route's just a little bit taller than it should be. I'm still super stoked with the way it turned out. For no trim ring, and for that to be the first pickup route that I ever did in my life, pretty good. Now we can take this big Mama Jamma P90 and thread that twisted leads through there, drill them pilot holes, get her screwed down, and I will be damned if that don't look exactly like that rendering that I made 5 years ago. Like, this is a strange moment for me, like when you envision something and you manifested it into reality from thin air. Now we can finally drop on this Bigsby. Now I don't know about the real ones, but this cheap zinc one is kind of flexy, so I go around it radially and tighten it a little bit at a time like a car tire. And then we can put the bridge post into these countersunk holes that'll allow the bridge to sit flat against the body. And then for the first assembly, I just guess where I think the bridge needs to be at height-wise, because it can go way too low. Oh, I'd also put these bridge posts toward each other like about 20 to 40 thousandths extra to keep this bridge tight, and man, it's hell getting it on and off. I can always just take a screwdriver and beat it down on there though. It is absolutely solid though and doesn't move without even tightening these Allen screws yet. So now it's time to actually start putting some strings on it. But y'all know first I had to put one on there, plug it up with some alligator clips, and jam down on it real quick. Well, there ain't nothing really exciting about putting strings on. I mean, these are locking tuners. You get to pull them tight, tighten them down in the back, just like a Schallers. Except when that you're turning these and tightening up the string, it feels like you're grinding coffee inside of it. Dude, it looks so badass, but the thing is, only thing I look is electronics. So what does it sound like? It needs a setup. It never existed before. It's just here for the first time ever. Well guys, that just about does it for this video. Yeah, I did that. I'm sure you want to see me play it, and you will in the very next video on this guitar. In fact, it's on my bench right now, and it's done got the mega super low action and a control pipe made, and it's gonna get some custom wood knobs made out of whiskey tops. So if you found this entertaining or educational in any way, please like and maybe subscribe. I am Clementine, you've been watching Heavy Metal ATC. Till next time. Look, no dots. Who can play my no dots guitar? I'm gonna tear it bitch up, 'cause it's got cheater dots.